Today I'm going to show you how to make dynamically scaling content using curves. Okay, so I've fired up the third person blueprint. I've added a couple of little extra HUD elements to help us debug this. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what curves are. So if you right click on the content area and go down to miscellaneous and click curve, you'll find that there's three different names of curves. Now the one we're going to use for this is curve float. I'll explain what the other two are towards the end, but they work exactly the same, just with one tiny difference. So this is a curve graph. If you've done sort of math before and you've drawn graphs and things, you know it works exactly the same. You've got two axes on a graph. This is what's called the time, the bottom axis, what UE refers to as the time, and the vertical axis is what UE refers to as the value. So what we can do is we can add a key to the line here, and we can set the values up in the top left. You can also just drag the key around as you like, but we're going to set this to be 0 and 0. What you got to remember is that both values are floats; they're not integers as well. So if you want to work with them as integers, obviously you've got the conversion. So if we'll create one down here, we're going to create another one, and we'll set it at 100 and 100. Now that curve's really big, and I could scroll about and try and find the end of it. But if you look up here in the top left of your bar, there's two little buttons, and that'll fit the curve within your current viewport, giving you a little bit of space around it. So you can make a ginormous curve and make it fit. You can also just hit the zoom to fit button, and that'll do everything. Which I believe the key is F. There is some snapping here. You can change the sort of settings on the snapping of when you're moving things around. I've never really needed to use that. But what we've got here is a linear curve. So at 55 on the time axis, the value is 55, and at 32, the value is 22. Sorry, 32. Now that's all well and good, but not everything we want needs to scale. We want to scale directly, linearly, or vertically, however you want to call it. So what we do is I can select these two axes here, and up here is a bunch of options, which are basically for interpolation. Now, if you've used Photoshop before, or sort of similar processes where you have vectors and you're drawing them, you might be used to this sort of little icon here where you can change the amount of the curves. But what this does is it makes it curved nicely as opposed to a straight direct line, but it curves it over time. Now these little buttons, this bar here, allows you to change the sort of amount of force that's put onto it, so you can force the curve right up or right down. You can make it shallow or whatnot. If you hit that's on the user. On user, it'll make them exactly both of them scale the same way. If you click break, it will allow you to do just one. What you can't do is, if you use the Photoshop, you can't drag this little bar in and out to make it put more pressure on. You can do what's called the linear interpolation, which basically is the standard one, and then there's a constant interpolation, which it will make it change immediately from 0 to 100. So as we go along the time axis here, as soon as we hit the next point, it'll then bounce straight up. So what we'll use is we can actually just use the auto, is what I tend to click, and then as you start to move it around, it changes it to user for you. And what this will do is it gives a nice shallow curve. So now, how do we use that curve? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to rename it first to be XP curve. What we're going to try and do is make it so that as we level up in our game, the amount of XP required for the next level scales automatically for us. So instead of us having to do for level 1 we need 100 XP and like writing that in a box or in a variable or a data table somewhere, or making a complex formula to scale it, we can just do this with a curve because it's nice and easy to edit, and if we want to change it. All the curve is doing in the background, I believe, is just making a mathematical formula for that curve. But I'm not a mathematician, and editing those kind of things, I don't understand how to do it. And this is much simpler for me, at least. So we will go into the third-person character blueprint. Now these are two variables I've made that are tracked on the UI that I've made. You'll see in a moment in the widget. What we're going to do is we're going to make a third new variable. We're going to call it XP curve. And it's already chosen curve float, if you just put in, if you just write in curve, find curve float, and because that's the type of curve we've made, and use a reference one as well, not an object, and then we can, select it from the drop down like you would select a mesh or any other kind of object, and then we're going to make a function called level up. I believe I've already made that function. Yes, I have. So we'll make it so when we press L, that function's called. This is going to be a really simple function. We're not going to track the amount of XP that we already have and things like that. We're just going to just do a really simple one. So I've already created is the current level and the XP to next level. So we'll take the current level. When we click this level up, we want it to increment that by 1. So there's a handy function, I believe, that was added in the previous version, the 4.8, or it could have been 4.9, where it's called increment int. There's one for floats as well, I believe, where it takes the integer you pass it, adds 1 to it, and then sets it. So it's sort of doing the addition and the save in one go, and it also passes the result out. But if you use this, just remember it will also save it to this variable. So if we were to do it, we'll save it to 2 and 3, every time you call this. So just be aware of that. If that's not the functionality you want, obviously just use a standard add. And then, so we'll take that out, and we want to, in fact, I'll get the curve first. What we want to do is if we get the curve and we drag off and we type in value, and click get float value. Now, if we imagine at the bottom of our curve, this is our level, our current level or our next level, and this is the amount of XP that we require to get that level. If I change this value to make it a bit larger, so it makes it a bit more obvious as to what's going on. So we've got 100 now, it's 10,000 XP to level up, and I go back into here. We take the level out and we pass it into the time, because that's the lower, the horizontal, and then we set that to be into the XP to next level there. So now whenever we fire this level up, what it's going to do is it's going to take the current level that was already set, add 1 to it, set it back, and then pass that current level into the graph, or the next level into the graph, and get the value. So say we're at level 31, it'll return the value. So it comes along here, finds it, goes up to the curve, finds what the value is over here. So if I click play now, you can see the little HUD I've created in the bottom left. Whenever I press L, it's incrementing the XP required for that level. So as you can see, it goes up and up and up, and if we keep going and up and going, all of a sudden 1000 XP, 2000 XP, and we've done that really, really easily. Now, that's not a lot of XP. Say you wanted it to be much more than that. We'll say we'll put in 2 more zeros, and we'll fit it to the thing. But we might also want it so that to begin with, you require quite a lot more XP to level up. And then we could say maybe around level 50, as an example, we want to start to sort of plateau. Or maybe we want to start to reduce it around level 80, but then as we get really closer to the end game of our game, it really starts to spike up in the amount of XP that's required. So you can see we just made those changes really, really quickly, and we just hit play again, and now all of a sudden it's requiring a lot more XP to begin with, and then it'll start to plateau out. And then if we keep going and going and going and going, and my finger's going to get tired if I keep pressing L, I should have chosen a smaller number. You can see it's hardly changing at all now, the amount of XP required. Now we've hit 80, it's really going up quite quickly now. 80, it's going up in really large increments. And then we hit a level 100. Now there is a slight issue with curves in that it will default, the value will always be the last known value. So obviously we've hit level 100, which is where our last one is. It's now just requiring us 1,000,000 XP every time. So it'll always go over here. So if you want something that scales infinitely, it's not technically possible with curves, but what you can do is you can just drag this way over here, So you could put in a huge number over here, really up here, and it's as much to your players, it will be as close to infinite as makes no difference. Obviously, if you needed it to be truly infinite, then you'd have to write a formula to do that or something along those lines. But that's it basically. That's how to use curves. Now I'll show you very quickly the difference between the other two curves in that if we make another curve and we choose a vector curve, it works exactly the same way, apart from instead of having just the one line on it, there's three lines. There's X, Y, and Z, or Z if you're American. And on the linear color, I believe it's called, there are 4 lines. So if you have some kind of data you want to store, you can see them over here, and you can show and hide them and lock them if you want to. But yeah, if you have some data, say you've got 4 pieces of really related data that you want to see on the same graph, you can set them specifically. You can set them all on one graph. But if you've got, I wouldn't suggest that unless they are truly related, because I think it's much easier to have 3 float curves and edit them independently than it is to have a bunch of curves with 3 things on and stuff like that. And I don't believe there's much of a performance gain to be had from using those curves, because if you only need one piece of data, you've got to get all three curves to get them out and things like that. So from a performance standpoint, it's probably not worth it either. So, but that's it. That's how to use curves. Nice and simple procedural content.